Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of Just Another Tinfoil Hat, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm your host, Zelia Edgar. The aim of this show is to discuss all aspects of the paranormal, from the relatively mainstream to the downright bizarre, to pose questions and entertain ideas regarding every angle of the unexplained. So, hang on to your tinfoil hats, keep your hands and feet inside the saucer, and please, enjoy the ride. Tonight, I'm very pleased to introduce my guest, Dr. Barry E. Taff, who holds a doctorate in psychophysiology with a minor in biomedical engineering, is a world-renowned parapsychologist who worked out of UCLA's former parapsychology laboratory from 1969 through 1978 as a research associate. During his 4-decade career, Dr. Taff has investigated more than 4,500 cases of ghosts, hauntings, poltergeists, and conducted extensive studies in telepathy and precognition, eventually developing the initial protocols and methodologies for what was later termed remote viewing. He also was himself investigated as a psychic subject, the results of which were published in Behavioral Neuropsychiatry, a laboratory investigation of telepathy, the study of a psychic, Volume 6, Numbers 1 through 12, April through December 1974, January through March 1975. One of the cases Dr. Taff investigated in 1974 gained international fame as the book and motion picture The Entity, starring Barbara Hershey and Ron Silver, released by Fox in 1983. Dr. Taff served as technical advisor on The Entity, as well as being represented in the film by the character Gene Kraft. What's unknown by the media is the fact that, in real life, The Entity followed its female victim for quite some time after the initial investigation, continuing its vociferous nature. Doris Beither died in 1999 of cardiopulmonary arrest at the age of 58. Dr. Taff has appeared on numerous TV and radio programs including Coast to Coast AM with George Knapp, CBS News, KNBC News, KABC News, Strange Universe, Unsolved Mysteries, The Joan Rivers Show, A Current Affair, Hard Copy, Sightings, Judge for Yourself, The Extraordinary, The Montel Williams Show, The Will Shriner Show, The Suzanne Somers Show, was a recurring guest on NBC's The Other Side, Haunted History, Mysteries and Scandals, ABC's World's Scariest Ghosts Caught on Tape, The Girls Next Door, Sci-Fi Channel's An Unknown Encounter and California's Most Haunted, highest-rated shows in sci-fi's history, for which Dr. Taff also served as creative consultant and technical advisor. Taff also has recently appeared in the DVD special feature sections of The Mentalist, Warner Bros. CBS TV 2009, and the feature film The Haunting in Connecticut, Anatomy of a Haunting 2009, and the 20th anniversary re-release package of Friday the 13th from Paramount Pictures, and most recently Ghostly Lovers on the Travel Channel from February of 2011, The Ghost Speaks 2012, Ghost Adventures 2014 from the Travel Channel, Ghost Adventures Aftershock 2015, also from the Travel Channel. He has consulted for government, business, and law enforcement, including the Central Intelligence Agency, Office of Naval Intelligence, National Security Agency, Defense Language Institute, Defense Intelligence Agency, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the FBI, Interpol, LAPD, California Highway Patrol, Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department, and the Westminster Police Department. He has served as a technical advisor or script doctor on the films Logan's Run, Demon Seed, Altered States, Poltergeist, and The Entity. Dr. Taff has written numerous articles for magazines and journals, and has been featured in many books on paranormal subjects ranging from precognition to UFOs. Dr. Taff's book, Aliens Above, Ghosts Below, Explorations of the Unknown, is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and bookstores everywhere. His website is called barrytaff.net. And once again, I would just like to welcome my guest, Barry Taff. Thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really, really excited about this show today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Ziggy. I'm glad we contacted each other.
Yeah, that's actually kind of an interesting story, too. I don't know if you want to just kind of briefly summarize it here. I'm at least very intrigued by it.
I was on Facebook 6 weeks ago, and I ran across one of your videos. You were talking, and I kind of froze because you looked exactly like a girl I dated in 1989 and 1990. Not a little bit like her, but I thought you were her. I go, she's made old videos, and she's posting them now. I met her. She was one of the students in one of my parapsychology classes. I was teaching at Beverly Hills High Adult School, Adult Education. And we were together for about maybe, 18 months, and then things started to happen, and she started freaking out. The relationship didn't go anywhere. That was a long time ago. So Now she's my age, so she'd be old. But when I saw your face, I went, what? And I blew up your face. You were talking, and enlarged the image, and it's not like you resemble her. You look exactly like her, and your voice is the same. Which, like I said, if I saw you, I would assume that you were her daughter, even though I don't think she ever had any children.
When you sent me that message, I just having a double, that's interesting enough, but the fact that it was directly related to parapsychology, that just totally blew me away. Yeah, that was really interesting. But I guess I'd really like to start off here by really asking, how exactly did you get into this study?
Okay. Growing up a child, you're in school, you're grammar school, whatever, and you're going to junior high, and then you go to high school and go to college. Anyway, the dominant element of my existence has been and is today paranormal encounters or experiences. And I thought everyone could do what I could do. The best way of describing in some part of it is I could close my eyes and think of a friend, and I could tell you where they're at, what they're doing, what they're wearing. Okay, so it's remote viewing, it's telepathy, it's clairvoyance. But the thing that really stuck with me was I remember in grammar school, I was 10 years old. It was the 5th grade, I believe, and at the recess. And, whatever you do, you're playing ball, whatever, in the courtyard. It was a sunny day, and a little girl named Christine, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl, is walking towards me. And she's wearing a sky blue dress with a sunflower on the top. And I'm looking at her, and then this other vision kicked in. And the best way to describe the vision is if you saw Man of Steel in 2013, and this where young Clark Kent is in school, and suddenly he's able to look through people and see inside them. That's exactly what I was able to do. Now I could control it to its most point. In the old days, I couldn't. It would kick on. So I'm looking at Christine, and I see a plastic bag under her dress and a tube going into her. Now remember, I'm 10 years old. I didn't know what a colostomy was. I went up to her and I said, Chris, what's that weird bag and tube under your dress? And she went nuts and went and got the teacher, and the teacher brought me to the principal's office, and he assumed that I either snuck in the girls' bathroom or I somehow looked under Christine's dress, which I did not do. So he said, you're in serious trouble, mister. We can have you expelled for this and arrested. I'm going to have to call your parents. So he called my mom while I was sitting in the office with him. And he telling her, and my mom says to him, yes, Barry can do that. And he went, what? And she said, Barry can do that. He goes, what are you talking about? He can look through people. He can what? Like Superman, X-ray vision. And he said, you're as crazy as your son is. And he hung up on my mom. And he said to me, I'll tell you this one more time. I'll excuse it this time. If it happens again, you're expelled, and you're going to be in jail. Well, it did happen again, but I was wise enough not to discuss it with anyone. That was a normal thing with me. I mean, people are like a piece of glass to me, that I can look through people in clothing as if there was nothing there. And I thought everyone could do this when I was young. I didn't realize that maybe they can, but they're not doing it. And as I grew older, the telepathic stuff, the out-of-body stuff, it was just everywhere. And so I figured I have to, what's going on? Why is this happening to me? Why not my friends and family? And I don't have any brothers or sisters, but I had cousins, and they thought I was kind of weird. And so anyway, in 1968 and early 69, there was a woman who had a parapsychology lab at UCLA's Neuropsychiatric Institute. Her name was Dr. Thelma Moss. I knew about her work in the field, so I wrote her letter. She never responded. I called the switchboard, left a message. She never responded. I ended up meeting one of her students who was working with her in one of my classes in an undergraduate college. And I told her what I could do. So he set up a meeting, me and Dr. Moss, at her house in Beverly Hills, which was like a few minutes from where I lived with my parents. And I met her. And again, I knew nothing about her life prior to being a parapsychologist. Nothing. So I'm talking to her, and she says, can you do psychometry? I said, yeah. All right. She threw me her keys, car keys, and house keys, whatever, keychain. And I was describing the people's names, and her eyes are getting really big. And I said, I see a fat blonde woman named Shelley, and she's a blue-eyed blonde woman named Shelley, and she's screaming all the time. her best friend was Shelley Winters, and albeit accurate description, although not very flattering. So anyway, Dr. Moss was convinced that I could do it. So she ran a study on me, conducted at UCLA, and okay, so it was published in a medical journal. Okay, so you're psychic, but why me? Why not my friends and family? Why was I growing up around people who didn't want to be near me because they were scared? But see, it goes beyond that. I've always looked really young for my age. In high school, it looked like I belonged in grammar school. I remember I've always had a problem taking pictures and being photographed since I was a kid. Pictures either look like I'm in a fog or there's strange lights in the photos. And when graduating high school, they took pictures for the yearbook. So you have to show up to school with a suit and tie, got to look really nice. And I hated wearing suit and ties because it made me feel too warm. So sitting there, they take a bunch of pictures, and weeks later, yeah, Barry, you're going to have to go visit the photographer. Why? Pictures did turn out. I went, oh, here we go. So I visited him, and he said, look at these pictures. It looks like there's a fog around you. I can't really make you out. It took a whole bunch of more shots, and after 2 more visits, he got one photo he could use. The most blatant manifestation of this problem occurred in 1978. My colleague and I went to go to CBS Television City on the southeast corner of Fairfax and Beverly Boulevard, and to be interviewed for a show they were doing. So they're talking with us. They needed to take a picture of my colleague and I with a Polaroid SX70. So before they could fire off the camera, my colleague throws out the comment, well, Barry doesn't show up in pictures. I go, what is he, a vampire? And I said to my friend, my colleague, why did you say that? Are you going to make me look like I'm insane? Okay, so the picture develops. It pops out of the camera, starts developing. And they look at it, and they look at us, and they go, oh, and they're freaked out, these 2 girls, probably a little older than me. And look, they show me the picture. I was maybe 1.5 foot, a foot to the left of my colleague, and you see him perfectly clear. All you see where I was a mass of white light. No face, wow. No hair, no body. And this has occurred more times than not. I can't make it happen. I can't stop it from happening. But I have an intense hatred of being photographed. I don't know why, but I do. I have no idea. I don't like the way I've looked in pictures. Anyway, if you looked at albums, my family's photo albums I was growing up, in pictures I took of my parents, almost every shot that I took, there were luminous anomalies, strange lights. And a picture of me in the backyard, November 1964. I think when my dad took it. And it looks like there's brightly multicolored comet zipping around me. Yeah, so anyway, I started working at UCLA. And it was an interesting thing. After the study was done, I continued to work there. And I took on 2 different avenues of research. Well, one was in the lab. And that was simply where I was interested. Could you take normal, healthy people? Could you apply normal learning paradigms to train them to become psychic, to enhance inherent ability to have? So I started trying it, and lo and behold, it worked. On my website, barrytaff.net, there's an article entitled Learned Psi, Training to be Psychic. It's a lengthy article. It goes into some depth on what we did. Sensory-deprived environments. We put people into a subtle hypometabolic state and an altered state of consciousness, but they were awake and alive. It's just the only input was from their mind, and we throw it. They'd given a target to describe verbally, and when it worked so well, it was spooky. What we did know is that Dr. Moss was sending people that were coming to the lab from the CIA, from the NSA, from Defense Language Institute, from all these different groups. And okay, but we didn't know. They showed up in civilian clothes. We had no way of knowing who they were. And they were there on multiple occasions. On one occasion, they gave us a target. We had no idea who these people were. It was a name and a location. And we started to describe, I remember in my case, details about a very large submarine with missiles on board it. and I kept using the word trident, and I went into detail, as a few other people did. And anyway, the session ended. At the end of the session, the people who gave us the target would give us feedback. And the learning paradigm is to apply positive reinforcement immediately to people when they have an accurate paranormal perception. They will get better because they'll learn what it felt like to have real information rather than noise. Anyway, so our discussions of this sub and its new missiles were so precise and exacting that they demanded we surrender the audio tape because it considered a national security matter, and we surrendered it. But it worked. And it worked most of the time. And we got bored with it because we can make it work pretty much whenever we want it. And my website article goes into great depth. The strangest case was the two of them. Dr. Moss had this girl come to the lab, to our group. I knew who she was, but I knew almost nothing about her. She was a couple of years younger than me. She's kind of wild, crazy, hippie type look. Remember, this is 1973, so bear in mind the time. And so gives us a target name, and we start describing in the house, huge glass walls, a lot of foliage, very lush, just stunning. And I saw a giant kitchen lined with empty jars of bako bits. I'm going, what? Okay, you've seen this in your mind's eye because it's completely dark in the room. And then I described this person being viciously beaten and mugged. Okay, so the girl takes the controls, she plays the tape back, and she's responding, yeah, the house was correct. His kitchen was lined with empty jars of bako bits. So would ask me why. And we almost got his name correct. Phonetically, we had trouble pronouncing it, but it was pretty close. But her daughter's being mugged. She goes, he's never been beaten up. A few days later, she calls the lab. Remember the other day, there's a group? Yeah. Remember I said, yeah. Well, unbeknownst to her, at that moment, when the group was being run, her friend was being viciously beaten and mugged up in San Francisco.
Oh, geez.
Now, she didn't know it. We didn't know who this person was. So what's the source of the information? And this happened more times than not, where we would describe things that were beyond the telepathic or clairvoyant. The idea that we're accessing information. And depending on where it comes from, relative to where we are when we perceive it, we call it something different. If it comes from the present, well, it'd be telepathic or clairvoyant. If it comes from the past, it's retrocognition. If it comes from the future, it's precognition. This is where it gets even stranger. An instance where we got tired of doing the real-time stuff. It was very easy to do, and just everything gets boring eventually. So we tried to do our first precognitive session. So it's the last session of that event, and room's quiet and pitch black, and we describe the randomly chosen target for the next week. Okay, so we describe a tall, blue-eyed blonde woman, very exotic-looking, model-like, statuesque in every respect. Clothing a darker beige pantsuit, just stunning. At 3-story home in the Hollywood Hills, baby grand piano. And then we start describing a very tall man, well over 6 feet, all in black. Black pants, black shirt, black gloves, black boots, black belt, black hat, black mask, black cape, and an imposing sword. And we thought we were losing our minds. So, okay. Now, every chair in the room had a number beneath it. I don't know why, but they did. And we also described the chair that this person would sit in of her own accord, because we didn't direct people where to sit. They could sit where they wanted to, other than one chair where my controls were. So the next week, we knew people come in from third parties, each given a little envelope, that's opaque envelope with a piece of paper and a number on it. We sit down, we roll dice, tell the new people, open your packets, and whoever number fits the roll of the dice, let us know. So roll the dice, and people open their packet. And this woman goes, "Oh, it's me." Now, we had forgotten what we said a week earlier. It was a week ago. How do you remember this stuff? It was so bizarre. So she's playing the tape back. I describe her. You could do a police depiction of her. It was that accurate. Even her clothing. She sat in the one chair we named a week earlier. Oh, but it could have been a coincidence. She grew up in a three-story home in the Hollywood Hills. Could have been coincidence. A large baby grand piano. Could have been coincidence. Then we get to the tall man who's all dressed in black. And she stops the tape when it's almost over, and she turns to us. She goes, "How do you know who I am?" And we went, "What?" She goes, "How do you know who I am?" And I went, "What are you talking about?" "How do you know me?" I go, "What are you talking?" She said, "My name is Tony Williams." And I went, "Who?" "Who's?" "My father's Guy Williams. He played Zorro for Disney."
Oh, my gosh.
And she said, "Wait a minute. When did you make the tape?" "A week ago." "A week ago? I didn't know it was coming here 3 or 4 hours ago. And then you chose me randomly. I don't get it." "Well, that means that the information is already there." "Yeah. But and it really unnerved her, as it did a lot of people. And it's the bottom line with all this, that we're accessing information, past, present, and future. Doesn't matter where it is if you're able to access it, which means the past information still exists. It also strongly suggests that the future's information already exists. And if you're able to access it, you could see what's going to happen before it does. But that is, how much control do we have over the shape of things to come? Is it all predestined? Is there many degrees of freedom? We tried the precognitive session again, weeks later, and all we kept seeing was fire, fire, fire. Okay, we're losing our mind. I'm up in the lab the next day, and fire engines are coming to UCLA. The conference room we were using for our work there had caught fire because a outlet behind one of the curtains had sparked. It shorted, and it created a fire. What a coincidence. That's all we kept saying was fire, and hours later, that's exactly what happened. And a lot of brave people went, "I don't like this anymore." Why? It's not fun. It's scary. But we're learning something. I don't want to learn this. Okay, and this is, now I told you the academicians I worked with, there was several psychologists, psychiatrists, different department heads, all in the area of science. And to a person, they all thought I was an alien. I went, "What?" And I said, "Have you ever met an alien?" "No." "Then how do you know what an alien is like?" "Well, it'd be like you." I go, "What are you talking about? You've lost your mind?" And, "Well, you perceive things differently. You're more attentive. You're more focused." I go, "Whatever." And they were frightened of me near me. They kind of stayed away from me as much as they could. It's okay. In our society, and in the culture of humanity, whatever race you're from, part of the world, when people are different, let's say they're a singer, they're an actor, they're a director, they're an athlete, they're famous for these things, they stand out. "Oh, wow, interesting." Okay, that's difference of normalcy, meaning, yeah, some people become famous and rich because of the work they do. They get a lot of attention. But if you're different for a reason that isn't similar to what other people are different for, people, they stay away from you. They think you're crazy. Now, this is to make a point clear. I got my doctorate in 45 years ago. Yeah, no, whatever, 1975. And I applied for different positions all over the country, not as a parapsychologist, but as a psychophysiologist or a biomedical engineer. That's what my doctorate's in. And, sent out letters, blah, 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 all over the world, actually, not just America. And I didn't get responses from most. Nothing. I guess the opening, they didn't like it. So months later, one response comes back. I forgot what school it was from, but it was a major school, and they said, "You have a lot of damn nerve asking to be trained here and to work here." What? Apparently, because I've been in the LA Times several times, in the Herald Examiner. I was on TV 4 times by then, 2 on the Town, INLA, other news shows. Apparently, they would think that my working would create a hostile work environment. People would always be asking me questions. They'd be frightened. They'd be intimidated. They wouldn't get their work done. And so, didn't get a normal job. To show you how extreme this prejudice is, let's jump to about 8 or 9 years ago. I currently co-own a number of patented medical devices that have nothing to do with parapsychology. They're medical diagnostic, non-invasive medical devices. So we wrote up a business plan. We submitted it around to get a lot of response because we're not in the club yet of people doing it. And we got it to a friend, and his associate brought it into the head of development of a major multinational electronics company. And the guy read it. He loved it. He wrote a response. He said, this stuff is worth billions of dollars. Okay. And he wrote an evaluation to go upstairs to the company that they should fund 3 of the 6 patents. Okay. And then weeks go by, nothing. Weeks go by, nothing. Months go by. What's going on? And finally, a man calls, and he said, "What kind of crap are you trying to sell us here?" I go, "What? I read the business plan. There's no evidence you've done any clinical research at all." What? I read the patents. They're indecipherable. I thought, what are you talking about? Then I said, "All right, sir, stop with the lies. Tell me the truth." And he went, "Okay, want the truth? I'll tell you the truth. Foreign accent. I'll tell you what type." And he said, "I looked you up. The ESP, the ghosts, the UFOs, the aliens, remote viewing. You're crazy. The minute I found out who you were, I threw the business plan in the garbage."
Oh, my word. That's sad.
This is the norm. This is what happens in the real world. If I'd already been really wealthy and got at least one of these devices onto the market, then you're an eccentric. But if you haven't become really wealthy, people think you're crazy.
See, and this ties in, like you were saying, even to like your earliest memories of this type of phenomenon. What is this kind of stigma against the paranormal, do you think? Or people who, I know you make a lot of distinctions too on your blog about, we need to start looking at the paranormal differently and kind of looking at this thing as something that is normal, normal state of people or places. Right. And I really appreciate that too, because I feel like, that's really the road to understanding this phenomenon that we currently don't understand. It provides a lot more opportunity for growth. What is that stigma against it? Is it just, the fear that people carry towards it?
I wanted to say one more thing. And
sure thing.
Curve my response into what you're saying.
Yeah.
There's an idea called implicate order. And what it is, I discuss it on my website and in my book. And it's the evidence suggesting that our long-term memories, not our short-term, that our long-term memories are not stored in our brain. They're stored in a zero-point power field. And the way we access them is through remote perception. And if this is true, and I believe it is, that means the way we recall things on a momentary basis throughout our life is essentially paranormal. Because there's no physical link between us and this power field. So all we have to do is access the data and perceive it. And then we have to, in science, everything's got a signal or a noise. The signal is the information you want. The noise is the fantasy. But like I said, people in society, we live in a culture where people tend to be frightened of what they don't understand. It makes them very uneasy. And I'll give you an example. One of my good friends is a writer-producer and known him for decades. And I met him a long time ago. Went to his wedding. His wife said, "Well, what's wrong with me?" Because I'm a medical intuitive. So I did my thing, and I told her, and I was right. And then every time I had come over to the house for a party or whatever would all talk. She would make sure that she would stay out of the room that I was in. And this is the norm, meaning it's fun and games until it starts to annoy people. It starts to, the best way, let me think. An example. 1973, met a girl named Carol in the lab, and we started dating, long story. So who cares? I'm dating another girl I met in the lab. And so we're together once, and I remember I said to her, "Oh, Carol," and I said, "You got a tumor here," and I showed her in the left breast, right? What do you mean? How do you know there's a tumor there? I said, "I can see it." Because what do you mean you can see it? I can see it. I said, "Don't worry, it's benign." How do you know? There's no calcium around it. She went, "What? What? You're crazy. Don't leave me alone. Don't talk about it." So she finished her degree around the same time. She got hired by a big company, and she had to have a medical examination for insurance, medical insurance. So they did an examination. They found a lump, did a biopsy. It was a usually benign tumor, right where I said it was, and they took it out. She goes, I can't be around you. She's like, I can't. It's like, I feel like a piece of glass around you. I feel insecure. But I helped you. I don't want that type of help. I don't want to be around people that can do this. You're scaring the hell out of me. But I helped you. I don't want it. And then occasionally, these experiences happen. Okay, very rarely. They happen to me where I'm shocked by what occurs. It takes a lot to shock me. A lot. And this is in 2007. I was set up on a date with a friend's girlfriend's friend. Gorgeous. And so I was taking her back to her friend's house because her car was in the shop, and it was raining. Put my window down to avoid condensation forming on the inside, and she leaned in to give me a kiss goodbye. I turned my head, and instead of seeing her beautiful face, I saw a hideous gargoyle image. Whoa. Not her, just a monster. I snapped my head back so violently. Had the window been down, my head would have gone through the glass. I would have ended up in the hospital. Jeez. What did I see? I don't know. I didn't tell her. I just said, "Oh, my neck hurts." So, I mean, these type of things around me are normal. It's, again, if you saw Man of Steel in 2013, mm-hmm. where young Clark Kent's, X-ray vision cuts in, that's what I went through. And it freaked me out at first, and then I went, "Oh, this is fun." And, people then, they stay away from you. They're scared of you. So, or they think you're insane.
And once again, I would like to remind everyone that you are listening to Just Another Tinfoil Hat, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm your host, Zelia Edgar, and we are visiting with Barry Taff. Do you think that this is like, for most people who have an ability like that, or, something similar to that, do a lot of them try to ignore it for the most part, in order to just kind of keep going with things, or...
Yeah, I mean, if you're living a normal life, the human condition on Earth is real simple. You grow up, you go to school, you get a job, you get married, you have kids, you get ill, and you die. That's it. My life has been so radically different that, obviously, I grew up, I think I did. I went to school and got an education. I never got a normal job because of the problems I had, as I spoke of earlier. There's really no comparison. There's part of us that we're not used to, and that we may never be used to it simply because it's outside the domain of normalcy. That's the problem.
Yeah, this is a concept I've kind of been interested in since the reading the Mothman Prophecies. And it has to do with the fact that a lot of people around that time started having, precognitive dreams about something happening. And there were even possible omens, and things like that are very intriguing to me because, I get the feeling that a lot of the times if we look throughout culture, throughout stories, throughout history, that sort of thing is kind of looked down upon. It never usually succeeds. And, I was just kind of wondering what your take on that was. If it kind of does just play into almost this fear of trying to understand that out of normalcy thing.
People are comfortable the way they are. When you introduce a new concept, that makes them reevaluate their existence and who they are, where they're coming from, where they're going to. The biggest question facing us is, who are we? Where we come from? Where are we going to? Why are we here? And sometimes the answers to that aren't good, because let's, that what's going on now with the virus thing and whatever, the viral thing, how terrible it is affecting the whole world. It's horrible. And we see the panic response people have had in terms of buying up toilet paper and paper towels and whatever. They're going crazy.
Oh, yeah.
If we think that's bad, it's nothing compared to what would happen if our government, let's say the Western world government, made full disclosure about UFOs and aliens. I have a funny feeling that what we learn would traumatize us so deeply it could trigger the next world war. What if we learn that we were made, but not in the image of God? What if we learn that another race that wasn't human made us through genetic engineering, and they're still toying with us? It would be the most destabilizing, socially destabilizing information ever given to the human race. If you're religious, you go to church or temple or synagogue or mosque, wherever you go, and you realize, well, so we're not from this God. Well, who are we? And, oh, no, if aliens are here, I want to be close to them, and every group within culture would want to be close to them. Now, in human history, whenever a vastly superior culture has met up with an inferior one, technologically speaking, the inferior one has either been assimilated or destroyed. That's in human culture. And the belief is this would happen again. And it would leave us with an inconceivable past and an unimaginable future. Because it goes back to what I first was talking about. When you can do things that others around you cannot, they're nice to your face, and then they just stay away from you. Why can you do this? The other type of research I've done has been out in the field investigating hauntings and poltergeists, and the majority of which are poltergeist activity. Now, before we get into the cases, let me explain something. If you've got a DVD in your hand, you want to watch it, what do you need? You need a DVD player, got to be plugged in the wall, got to have a TV or connected to a TV, it's got to be plugged in the wall, you got to have a remote, you got to put the DVD in the player, you got to use it and turn it on, and it's playing. If any part of the ensemble is missing, you get no image. Well, the ensemble needed for poltergeist activity is very complex, more than we ever imagined. I thought when I got in this field, we'd find, there's dead people running around, blah, 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 spirits, and it's a lot more complicated than that. The parameters of the condition are really simple. One of them is the environment. You need an environment that's somewhat anomalous electromagnetically or geomagnetically. Then you need people that are hypersensitive to that type of environment. You need also people who have very low tolerance. They can't cope well with stress. It goes deeper than that. Turns out also that some of the majority of people who have recurring bouts of this phenomenon around them tend to be either seizure-prone or epileptic. When they take their medication to quell their seizures, the phenomena stops as well. They stop taking the medication because it sometimes makes them nauseous and dizzy. What happens is, the phenomena starts again. And this is where the faces and places may change, but the parameters do not. It's always the same. Always. Not some of the time. It's always the same. And we know enough now that we might be able to artificially create these events by driving the phenomena in human being, an extension of living human people in recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, driving it by modulating a ultra-low frequency magnetic field. You might create phenomena, but the problem is you might also kill the people in the environment. It's this pattern In science, there's two ways of doing research. One is you do it in a laboratory. You can form a hypothesis, you conduct experiments to prove or disprove your hypothesis. Okay, you replicate it. That's science in a lab. In the field, it's different. You can't coax the stuff into a lab because we don't know enough yet about it. So you try to collect data over a very long period of time, hoping that you see longitudinal patterns in the data. They're there, they're demonstrable, and they're consistent as hell. And this is the problem. Some people they're acting what I would call a biological operational amplifier. They're acting as the laser in the DVD player. They're driving it. If they're out of the environment, the phenomena can bleed off. Now, this is interesting. Let's go with a couple cases that demonstrated this. The entity case, August 22nd, 1974. My colleague at the time was in a bookstore in Westwood, as depicted in the movie, the only accurate aspect of the film. And he's talking about our work with a friend. And Doris Beitzer, the lady the phenomenon was focused on, is the next silent. She hears him, and she said, "My house is haunted." So my colleague gets her name and number. We call her. We go out there on August 22nd. Hot, humid house. And the very first thing she tells us is that she'd been repeatedly raped by the ghosts. A bunch of ghosts who went, "Oh, God, the woman's psychotic. She needs psychiatric intervention." Now, the house was really hot and humid, except the bedroom. That was where the phenomena seemed to be focused, where she was being raped. Couldn't prove it, couldn't disprove it. But the house, that bedroom was ice cold and had a terrible stench to it, like decomposing organic matter. We brought in a Hewlett-Packard sniffer. We could not locate the source of the smell that would come and go. So we assumed she was crazy. We left. We told her to contact one of the psychiatrists at CLA Medical Center. I don't think she did that, though. Anyway, a couple of weeks later, she called back, and some neighbors and friends had witnessed us. Okay, we go back. It's still hot. It's still humid outside. And we're in the kitchen talking to Doris. A lower cupboard opens, and an iron skillet flies out across the kitchen, taking a parabolic course. We looked to see if there were wires or children or animals in there or springs. Nope. And then it evolved from there. And now, let me give you a little taste of the environment of Doris. She had 4 children. She had a very young girl, which a little baby we never met. She had 3 boys, 1 bigger, older, taller one, and 2 younger, smaller ones. She claimed she was being raped by 3 male entities. 2 smaller ones would hold her down, and the biggest one would rape her. She had a very disturbed past, or she was abused by her family members, and they disinherited her because she was a little too rambunctious. They got rid of her. They disowned her, basically. And every child she had was from a different man. And she'd walk around the house half naked, drinking a lot of beer. She wasn't an alcoholic as far as we could tell, but there's no correlation that's ever been demonstrated I've read about between alcoholism and poltergeist activity. So at one point, we're beginning to see lights in her house, luminous anomalies, always lime green in color, always, like what I call corpuscular masses of light, and they're zipping around. Okay, so we got one picture. We see a ball of light with a tail, like a comet. It's on my website. It's in my book. Okay, we couldn't tell where it was coming from or going to. We had no reference. So we put up black poster boards on Doris's walls and ceiling in her bedroom with duct tape forming like a checkerboard grid. Each panel had a number and a magnetic orientation, so we'd have reference where the thing started, where it ended. And we saw these lights coming on, zipping around, flying around Doris. Another picture on my website in my book, you see Doris is on her bed and she's cowering below the lights as they're zipping around her. But what you see over Doris is a very brilliant arc of light. What's important about this image is that behind her, the walls meet at a 90-degree angle. perpendicular to each other. Well, if the light was projected against the wall, the light would be bent as the wall is. But the light is not bent because the light is in free space. But we never saw this. We just got it. Another shot, again, on my website, in my book, two arcs crossing each other at perpendicular angles in space. Doris was not even in the frame of the shot. And then at one point, I'm condensing this because we don't have hours to talk about everything. The lights coalesced to the corner of the bedroom, this lime green, and was a large apparition, well over 6 feet, maybe 6'5", 6'7". You could see the upper torso, the head, the brow ridge, you could see the jaw, you could see the pectorals, the arms. And this was not a static image. It was articulating. It was moving like it was looking at us. You couldn't see the eyes or any facial details beyond what I said. And then, poof, like a light going off. Now, we fired several professional photographers. We fired many shots of what we saw. Most of what we saw, we could not photograph. What we photographed, we never saw.
Huh.
Which, now I told everyone, write down what you saw. Well, just write it down. Okay. And everyone wrote it down. There were up to like 20 people. Write down. Don't talk to each other. Write it down. Everyone saw the same thing. Now, unlike what movies tell us, there's no such thing as a mass hallucination. There's mass hysteria, which we're seeing now in our culture because of the virus. But there's not mass hallucination unless everyone's on drugs. And even if they were, there's such differences from one person to the next. You would get the same, delusional thinking going on, or, illusion. So what did we see? So we never figured that out. At one point, we're in the bedroom again, lights zipping around, and my colleague said, do something. So suddenly we see the duct tape being ripped off the poster boards on the ceiling, taking the paint and plaster with it. It flies across the room and hits Doris in the head.
Oh, wow.
And then another one happens, flies and lands at her feet, but it didn't touch her. Okay, so another point, one night, she said that the fuse box was ripped out of the wall and thrown at her. And another night, called us at like 1 a.m, and all the poster boards were torn off the wall, all of them, and the paint was gone, and a lot of the plaster was gone. She could have done it, but I don't think she did. I don't think she was a good actress to face that. She was somewhat cryptic and evasive. She never answered most of her questions. She wouldn't even give us her age. When people are that evasive, you kind of know they're hiding something.
Yeah.
And we don't know. And now she passed away in, I think, 1999 of cardiopulmonary arrest. But they don't know what caused the arrest of her heart and lung.
Wow.
So now I should say that she moved from Culver City. She lived on Braddock Drive. She moved from there to Carson. We found her with the help of Frank DiFilippo, who wrote the book, The Entity, and wrote the screenplay that was rewritten by the director. Anyway, we found her again, and stuff flying around. It's in my book. Chapter 2 is called The Real Life Entity Case, and it goes through exhaustive detail on the case. And so rather than trying to go over all the minutiae here, it should be said that I, for one, do not in any way believe that Doris was raped by ghosts. I'd be willing to bet that she was actually seizure-prone or epileptic. She had a delusional fantasy, the libidinous fantasies about having sex with kids, and she always wanted sex, more sex. And what we saw was the manifestation of that psychokinetic speaking. She moved, and then she moved again to Riverside or San Bernardino. Frank went to see her out there, Frank DiFilippo, and the water was turning on and off, banging noises, things moving around. And then she moved again, and to Texas, I think. Came back to L.A. when the film came out. She kind of liked it. We saw her. But she wouldn't talk with us about a lot of things. She would talk with Frank DiFilippo because he's older, like a father image. So the case is extraordinary. because we were able to capture things on film that we never saw. And we gave our photos to West Coast editor of popular photography way back when, Mr. Adrian Vance, and he reviewed our pictures, and he looked at the cameras, and he said, I looked at the negatives, and he goes, I can't begin to explain it. I don't know what it is. Okay, so you see the problems we're having that now it also is important now. Another part of the formula, certain people, certain researchers act as reinforcers. They amplify the phenomena by their presence. Other people act as inhibitors. There's a term I've come up with. It's in my book and on my website. One of the last links between the phenomena and us, the physical world, is what I call inductive resonance coupling. So everything else works. You're sensitive to this, you're sensitive to that. This is the person, if your nervous system is at the same pulsation or frequency of the magnetic environment, boom, it triggers the event. But 99% of the time, it is not. And even if it does, the phenomena changes, meaning the frequency drifts. It's a spectrum will shift higher or lower, the pulsation will change, pulse duration, pulse interval, pulse repetition rate. There's all these variables. But that inductive resonance coupling, that's it. That's the final element that takes people and makes things happen when they're around. And like I said, I guarantee you, if we had run a full medical workup on Doris way back when, we would have found that she's seizure prone. That's my guess.
Well, I'm very interested too in the idea that, somehow people are directly connected to paranormal phenomena, and that, that makes a lot of sense, what you're saying.
It's an extension of us.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
an extension. We don't end with the tip of our nose and the tip of our toes. It's an extension of us, and that, therefore, it gives a sense of responsibility to us. Not that we can stop it or we can make it happen, but we are part of the problem. Are, in other words, if a tree falls in the forest and there is no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? In this way of thinking, it does not make a sound. I've worked on thousands of cases, and the odds of running into phenomena is always astronomical. But occasionally you do, and the people are able to communicate with you. They're willing to talk about what their medical history and whatever. And here's this link to epilepsy again. And they're seizure prone. There's very high amplitude electromagnetic or geomagnetic fields in the environment, blah, blah, blah. They have stress, emotional instability in the psychodynamic environment. And it's the same thing over and over again. And the question is, okay, we know this. What about it? Now, this is what's important. By the energies we know of on Earth, there's electromagnetism, there's strong, weak nuclear forces, and there's gravitation. And by any of those, before a heavy object, like a piece of furniture, like a couch or a 200-pound man, was picked up and thrown across the room by nothing that we can see, before that would happen, your clothing, and everything in the room would burst into flame from the liberated energy of the process, force, to produce heat, second law of thermodynamics. But in these environments, the environment usually gets colder, which means it's not exothermic, it's endothermic. But there's nothing else we know of that does that yet. If we find out what this is, they can do work, incredible levels of work, without production of heat. Everything changes.
Yeah.
Give us access to energy that could power the world free of heat. No more oil, no more nuclear, no more hydroelectric, no more gasoline generators, no more internal combustion engines. The ability to tap into energy that's ubiquitous, 0-point field. We could go to the stars with this, but no one's doing anything. And what's interesting, we've had cases that have begun as poltergeist events and then evolved into a CE3 or CE4. We've had cases that began as alleged abduction and turned in to paranormal phenomena, paranormal fallout, spontaneous healings, poltergeist activity. Several cases. We've had actually more than several, but I only talk about some of them. One was in the late 1970s, and it was an executive from one of the television networks in Los Angeles. And he poltergeist activity in his home, called when I went out there, him and his wife, really normal people, and nothing happened. We were there. So we, okay. Sometime later, he and his wife were taking a trip up north, and driving up in their car, and they saw what they thought was a plane coming down, like going to crash. They come around the bend into a valley, up the hill somewhere, and there's something on the ground, all right, but it's not a plane. It's a disc. It's on the ground. There's a couple guys, little guys walking around, metallic suits, and they see them, and they remembered turning. They saw a light, and they blacked out. They woke up hours later driving hundreds of miles away.
Oh, wow.
It destroyed their life. The guy got really angry and bitter and irascible, and he lost his job, and the marriage failed. Couldn't keep a job, got another job, lost that one. This is decades ago. When this stuff comes home to roost, it can get pretty intense. 1977, a case I was called out on Valentine's Day in Los Angeles, and go out there. And I'd already talked to the woman on the phone, but I didn't know her. And I walked in, and I was so overwhelmed by her physical beauty, I was stunned. This was the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. And I just stood there, and my friend had an elbow in me. Barry, I went like, huh? What? Oh. So things going on in the environment. And long story short, so she and I started dating, got involved. Everything was going great. It was a perfect relationship. She started working with us in our groups, and we all, too, the cases we worked on for police, like missing person cases or unsolved murder cases. She was really good. One of the fast learners, and initially. Anyway, so together, and then the dreams came, and the dreams are always the same. The dream said, July 22nd, relationship's going to end, but it didn't tell me why. The dreams to keep going. I didn't tell her. She would probably think I wanted to end the relationship, which I did not want to do. And then the dreams kept coming, and I'm not going to say anything. So I wrote down. Anyway, I kind of forgot about it. July 22nd comes up. We're sleeping together at a condo she had in the Hollywood Hills. And I wake up, and she's under the covers, and she's sobbing. Why didn't you help me? I go, what? Why didn't you help me last night? What are you talking about? When the room lit up. What room? The bedroom. I'm going, what? She claims the room lit up, and she found herself floating. Then she found herself going through the wall or whatever, and she was in a metal room on a metal table or whatever, pedestal-like table. And the room was very bright, shiny metal, and there was little guys around her. No hair, no nose, no ears, big black eyes, typical gray. They had her tight, restrained at her ankles, her abdomen, her wrists, and her neck. Very hard restraint. And hurting. They were cutting and doing things to her, and she was freaking out. And listen to this. I told her, do you know anything about UFO abduction? Now remember, this is July of 1977. So the world wasn't really into this quite that yet. And she said, why didn't you? I said, what do UFO have to do with UFOs? I go, okay. So it took another hour to coax her out from under the cover. Comes out. She was bleeding. She had bruises, black and blue bruises around her ankles, her wrists, her neck, and her abdomen, like she'd been restrained. She was bleeding from her nose, bleeding from her ear, bleeding from her rectum and from her uterus, but she wasn't menstruating. Okay, and the power had gone off from the house for a couple hours. We found in the middle of the night. So she didn't believe in UFOs. She had no interest in UFOs. She didn't call them aliens. She was little guys, and their skin reminded her of a reptile, and she hated reptiles. So one of the neighbors, I was leaving hours later, and he said, did you see that thing over here last night? I go, what thing? It was hovering right over here where our homes are. What happened? The power went out. Look, reddish-orange thing, and we didn't know what it was, but it killed all the power.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's interesting. Anyway, our relationship degenerated, was gone. She became a very unusual religious zealot, and she went right over the edge. There were no psychologists or psychiatrists that would treat this because most of them just thought you were mentally ill. You had a psychotic break or something. Had this not occurred, whatever it was, we would have been married in less than a year. Now, she looked sort of like a combination of a young Liz Taylor and Joan Collins, very exotic looking. And it got along perfectly up until this event. I can't prove what happened. I can't disprove what happened. But she claimed that I've talked to her occasionally over the years. She married another devotee of this odd religion. And but her delusional mindset became so tainted with the paranormal psychobabble that her abilities were pretty much gone. Mm-hmm. And it's bad enough that it happened, but if it had to happen, thank God it occurred before we were married. It would be terrible. You're married, you're actually settled down, things are moving along, and then oh God.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
And so that's, there's an article on my website called a life-changing paranormal event, and it gets into this in some detail. My book goes into this in even more detail. Some people say, why didn't you get married? Well, I came close. What happened? My girlfriend was abducted. They go, oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Girlfriend was abducted. And, I remember her and I were sharing the same bed. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they didn't bother me, but they took her, for making a joke about this horrible event that ended my relationship with this girl, if I was them, I wouldn't have taken me.
Oh, wow.
Because I would have said, I'm not leaving till you tell me what energy source is and what your propulsion system is. And if people want to read about some of this, they could blog on my website. An article is called Building a Warp Drive Engine, and it goes into extreme detail on what the evidence suggests could be done, if not already been done. Not as good as Star Trek, but similar. So why is it that we've had UFO cases that begin as poltergeist things and end in an abduction or vice versa? What's the linkage? Probably because the energy UFOs are using, with the closest an analog to our world would be the paranormal. And again, energy that can do things we can't begin to even imagine. There's been a lot of talk about UFOs over the last 18 months. Mm-hmm. This stuff is real. It's paranormal, but we're connected to it, meaning it's the energy that paranormal is not electromagnetic. It is not nuclear. It is not gravitational, but it can affect all of them. And the way this unique energy coupled with us is through our biomagnetic field. And this is the last thing that gets interesting. It's really easy to measure a bioelectric field because they're pretty strong, millivolts. Easy to measure. Measuring a biomagnetic, you need superconducting sensors. It's really weak. It's like 1 million times weaker than the electric field. And however, poltergeist agents, their bodies are generating such strong magnetic fields that we can measure it with instruments. But around normal people, you can't. And what a coincidence.
Yeah.
This coupling. So this stuff's there. The question is, what are we going to do with all this? Where is this going to take us? What are we going to learn from it? How is this going to improve the human condition?
Now, I know we're pretty much out of time here, but I just have one more question that I'd just like to get your take on.
Sure.
And it has to do with the fact that I do feel like there's kind of a renewed interest, and again, largely to a lot of, the pop culture. There is a renewed interest in the paranormal, but unfortunately, the thing that I've noticed is that there does seem to be kind of a diminishing interest in parapsychology. Just what are your thoughts on that?
You made a very significant point. Okay, right now, science is, people don't want to hear about it. They don't care about science. Most people know nothing about the world they were born into. They don't have a need to. You ask the average person, why is the sky blue? They can't tell you. Ask them what the primary gas in our atmosphere is. They can't tell you. They don't have a need to know. They don't know. When you start getting into the science stuff about the phenomena, people turn a deaf ear because they think, oh, it's all spooky stuff, it's ghosts and aliens, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot more than that. And parapsychology is almost an obsolete term.
Mm-hmm.
It's just anti-science. People don't care. They don't want to read about it, they don't want to hear about it because they don't know anything about it, and it's irrelevant to them. And that's one of the problems. They don't know. And if you don't understand what's going on, you get frightened about it. And it's like with ufology. When our government first started investigating UFOs actually a little before World War II, but during World War II, people were terrified. It must be a sign from God. This is God fighting Satan and the devil. What? This is the 20th century. What are they talking about? Guess what? Even to this day, for what the evidence shows, the people investigating it and the government think the same way. This is not the 16th or 15th century. This is the 21st century. But the mindset has not changed due to dogma and ignorance. And this is the problem.
Man, well, with that, unfortunately, we'll have to wrap up. So do you have any speaking engagements or shows coming up? And direct people to your website as well.
Just to punch my name in online, you'll find most of the stuff. I don't even know where I'm doing it when. Another show. I've been interviewed thousands of times over the years, and I feel it's important because the whole point is if we don't educate people about what's going on in the field from a scientific perspective, they're never going to learn anything, and they won't care what happens.
Once again, I would like to thank my guest, Dr. Barry Taff, for an incredibly intriguing conversation tonight. I would also like to thank Irene Allen Block and Mark Johnson, the people in charge here at the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and a thank you, too, to John Hutchinson for composing my intro and outro music. With all that said, if you enjoyed this program, you can catch new episodes every other Monday on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And go ahead and check out my YouTube channel, also called Just Another Tinfoil Hat. Again, this has been Just Another Tinfoil Hat, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And I am Zelia Edgar, signing off.